Maggie. I'm one of the teachers at the Florida School of Holistic Living. And today, welcome to my garden as we're going to talk about ginger. And ginger is a family of plants that are so full and prolific and grow really well here in Central Florida that I wanted to introduce you to one of my favorite varieties of that ginger. And to start with saying, I know a plant genius. His name is Andy Firk. You can look for him on Facebook. It's Andy, A-N-D-Y, last name Firk, F-I-R-K. If you don't know him and you're into Central Florida plants, you should get to know him because he has quite a library of them. Specifically teaching class on the 75 different gingers that are growing in Central Florida. And I know that seems like a lot of plants, but when we're talking about ginger, if you're reading in herb books about uses of ginger, they're talking about one specific plant within that family. It's Zingiber officinale, and officinale means that it's been used in official apothecary since Latin was around, because it's a Latin term. Years ago, almost 10 years ago, I went to the local plant nursery. I was really excited. I lived in an environment where I could grow ginger and have access to it year-round, and I had a lot of shade, which you also kind of need if you want to grow gingers. And so I went to our local landscaping or plant nursery and said, hey, I want to grow ginger. I want to be able to use it for tea and things like that. And they said, sure, take this one. It's exactly what you need. I brought it home, I put it in my garden, I waited a couple of years, as a lot of people like to do, in harvesting that ginger. I called a friend of mine a couple of years later and said, hey, it's time to harvest my ginger, I'm really excited. She came over, I started harvesting a little bit, and it didn't smell right, it didn't taste right, and I don't recommend that. You should always know exactly what you're tasting. It could be problematic for a lot of plants if you're tasting the wrong one. So make sure that you know what you're tasting. So it didn't taste right, it didn't smell right. So I sent a picture to Andy, which I mentioned to you before, and Andy said, actually, I'm not familiar with that ginger. So I knew that it wasn't the Zingiber officinale that I was looking for. And there are a lot of other gingers. I asked some of my Instagram friends a few days ago, what's your favorite ginger? Because there are so many different ones. And one friend said shampoo ginger, which that's the common name. And often the common name will give you an identifying aspect of the plant, but not always, because shampoo ginger is also a wapui ginger, and its botanical name is Zingiber zirambet. So the botanical name really helps you to identify the exact plant that you're thinking about. Because I went into my nursery and said ginger, they just didn't know I meant this variety of ginger. So Zingiber officinale, it is the rhizome that we're talking about, and here I have some rhizomes that I collected from a local health food store. And sometimes you'll see them described as the root, but it's really an underground fruiting body. On this one, you can see this is the root of ginger. And then this is the rhizome, and this is the part we're talking about whenever we're working with ginger. It's anti-inflammatory, which means it moves things through the body. David Hoffman, which is in this book, David Hoffman is a scientist and herbalist and prolific writer about working with plants. And he says that ginger is a stimulant, and it's specifically beneficial for getting blood to flow to the extremities. So like if you have cold hands or feet, it can be really nice to sip on a little bit of ginger tea, a little bit of ginger tea to get the blood moving to the extremities in the body. because of this movement that it has, an interaction with the blood, sometimes it's considered contraindicated, or you should watch out for consuming a lot of ginger if you are on pharmaceutical blood thinners. So watch out for that. It's also considered an emmenagogue, which it helps bring on menses. Like, it's moving blood through your body. And bringing on of menses, that's emmenagogue, is like delayed period, and you're keeping it moving. I read in one place to watch out if you are pregnant to avoid it, but ginger has been used for a really long time for people in that first trimester of pregnancy that you can have a lot of nausea or morning sickness. So just be aware that it's in smaller amounts, like 1 or 2 grams a day seems like it's fine. But I'm not here to diagnose or treat anybody. You should definitely talk to your medical providers before you use any of the suggestions I have for you today. Ginger can also be really helpful for cramps. So it has that moving ability through the body. So cramps, either taking it as a tea, or you can use it topically. So one way that people like to use it for cramps, and that's either menstrual cramps or even muscle cramps, is to apply it topically. And so you're either taking some of the dried, cut and sifted rhizome and rehydrating it with some water, and then taking some of the plant material and gauze and applying that to your skin, or taking a piece of cloth and dipping it in to the water. This is called a fomentation. So you would take the cloth, you dip it into the decoction or the tea, and apply that to get blood moving in that area of the body. That works really well if you don't really like the flavor of ginger. But if you do like the flavor, then I like to recommend that tea because it tastes really nice. Ginger is also has been used for a long time as an antimicrobial, and antimicrobial is this broad term used for cootie fighters. That's my real technical term, cootie fighters. Full of cootie fighters, so I like to incorporate ginger in my life when I'm either experiencing like an onset of a cold or a bug of some kind, or I'm trying to fight something off. I feel like that hot, dry gets things moving, especially if there's a lot of snot involved. It's going to dry everything up and move it all along. A little bit of ginger tea as a gargle for a sore throat can be really nice. Ginger is also what we call a diaphoretic, which means it makes you sweat. So I have to be aware of that outside and on a hot day in Florida. It's actually not that hot here. It's probably 87 or something, which might be hot for you, but not so hot for us yet. So I like to have a little bit of that ginger tea and be mindful that it might make me a little bit more sweaty. So that wonderful aromatic quality makes ginger really nice as a carminative. Like, it helps you burp instead of fart. And I have an herbalist friend, the Garden Jules. You can find her on the social media as well. She made this, it's a fire cider that is with plants that are all local to her in South Florida, but it starts with ginger. So fire cider is this combination of plants that are really fiery, and it's typically an apple cider vinegar, which makes it a nice way to get it into your body if you want to just cook out the cooties, is what I call it. So it's really hot, spicy things like ginger, garlic, onions. Sometimes you'll see fire cider recipes that include horseradish. This one, she's included Scotch bonnet pepper, which is super spicy. In Central Florida, we grow cayenne really well. Cayenne can be really nice in that fire cider. And when you're making a fire cider, It's just like any other tincture preparation. You're filling half of whatever your container is with dried herbs or fresh. If it's fresh, like you're chopping up your ginger and your onion and your garlic, you would go a little bit higher. Chop it up, fill up that jar, and then add your apple cider vinegar all the way to the top within a ½ inch of the actual top, not this lip, but the actual top. Covering it, shaking it every day. And the beautiful thing about putting things in apple cider vinegar, like ginger and garlic and onions, is that that apple cider vinegar I could use tomorrow. And it's already going to have some of that spicy quality that I'm looking for if I'm trying to cook out the cooties. I don't think your medical providers would say cook out the cooties, but it works for me. Okay, so that is fire cider. I really like it in that tea form. I find it to be really heating and moving for me. Externally, sometimes you'll see it included, not just the fermentation or the poultice, but sometimes you'll see ginger included in salve form. And David Hoffman, not Dr. Hoffman, David Hoffman even recommends ginger topically for things like arthritis, and he suggests that taking it in that tea form gets things moving, and then applying topically keeps things moving in whatever area that you're really thinking about. So ginger, honey is another fun way of incorporating ginger into your life. Ginger rhizome can be found in several different forms. So you can get it like this at your health food store. You can find it dried, cut and sifted, also health food store. Or you can find it dried and powdered. Now, dried and powdered gives you free and easy access to, free flowing and easy access to making ginger honey if you want it really fast. That's the thing about powdered herbs, is that you can access whatever you're making really quickly. And so I'm taking, it's roughly 4 ounces of honey and 1 to 2 tablespoons of a powdered herb. That's my basic herbal powder honey mix. 4 ounces of honey and then 1 to 2 tablespoons of any powdered herb. Today it's ginger, and so I have the powdered ginger, and you would fill your container about halfway, and in a minute I'm going to show you how I might incorporate fresh ginger into this idea. And even with the fresh ginger, sometimes I'll go ahead and start with half that jar already filled. And then I'm adding about a tablespoon of powder, and then I would fill this jar and I'd stir it up. I might use the back end of a spoon and really stir it up, fill the jar, and then I'd have access to that ginger honey really easily. If I'm having a little bit of upset stomach, I find the ginger honey is really fantastic. If I have kind of a raspy cough that's annoying, the honey can be really soothing, and then the ginger is going to kill off those cooties as it goes down, and also help with the discomfort as it goes down. Working with fresh rhizome, it's a lot like working with maybe a carrot. So when you see recipes for working with fresh ginger, some of them say to use a peeler to take off the outer layer. And others say it's not really necessary. So you could use one of these carrot or potato peelers to take off the top. If you want, if you are growing it yourself, sometimes I do it just to make sure I'm getting all the dirt off, because the industrial techniques of getting the dirt off, I find it to be just more effective. So after you have your ginger sort of peeled, you can take a knife and slice it really thin, super thin. Super thin, I'd say like as thin as that edge. And then you're adding pieces. They can be longer pieces. You just want to make sure they're super thin. And then you can put them into the honey. And just make sure that there are no air pockets. That ginger is surrounded by the honey. You just want to make sure there's no air pockets around that fresh ginger. And you can fill it up. Ginger has pretty good cootie biting ability on its own, but with the honey it can be really nice as a way to get pathogens not into your body. Ginger's been used for a really long time to help preserve food, so has honey. So you can use it in that way, and then you have fresh honey. So if you're having a little bit of a upset belly or something, you can pull out a little piece of that honey and chew on it. It can be really nice. And also just throw it in my water. You can also freeze ginger. Sometimes I go through phases where I'm using it more than others. You can pop this whole thing in the freezer, and then when it's time to pull it out of the freezer, you can grate it. Just watch out for your fingers. You can grate it and add to food. You can slice it. I really like having a little bit of fresh ginger in soups or stews. You can slice it. You can grate it and add it to your tea blends. So you can have access to ginger whenever you want it. Any questions about preparing and using ginger? It smells really good. I wish you had a sense of smell through the phone right now, because it smells amazing in our yard. So, I mentioned in the beginning of the talk about growing ginger and my experience growing ginger. So, a lot of the identifying aspects of ginger are in the flower. So, back whenever I sent the pictures to our dear Andy, and he said he didn't really know, part of the challenge was that there wasn't a flower. And having a ginger that is flowering is not constant, and not all gingers will flower. So the best way for you to know if you want to grow it for yourself is if you take ginger from your health food store or your friend, the rhizome, and you let it, in Florida we can just let it sit on the counter. You can let it sit in the fridge. It will still start to grow a little bit. And you can see that this one is starting to sprout a little bit. This one, just a lighter color. If I rub it, it has that strong ginger scent. Here's one that's starting to sprout a little bit. I like to let these sprout a little bit more, so I start to see a little bit of green coming out. But really, at any point in Florida, at any point, you can put them under the ground. So all of the other ginger that I have now has come from this. Either I got it from a health food store, or when I harvest it, I save some and I leave it so that I know what I'm working with. Yeah, question?
How much fresh ginger do you use in a tea?
Oh, okay. So The general rule with tea is 1 to 3 teaspoons per cup. If I'm using fresh, I'm going to be closer to that 3 teaspoons. If I'm using dried, I'm closer to that 1. Smells so good. So let's take a walk. So this is the beautiful ginger that I've been growing for a really long time, and it finally flowered. It's this beautiful flower and officinarium, and I need to do more research on this, but I know that officinarium or the thing about Latin or botanical names that it's kind of elusive to me. I'm not really sure how to pronounce them sometimes, but I know that officinale and officinarium have been used in really similar ways. That means that this variety has been used by people for a really long time as part of their apothecary. So I'm really excited to get to know this variety of ginger, and I'm really excited that my then 4-year-old had the wisdom to not let me just compost the whole thing, because I wanted to make sure I knew what I had in my yard. So we have that variety here, but the variety that comes from those rhizomes from the grocery store or the health food store, it looks a little bit different, but this is such a full and lush variety of ginger right now. I thought I'd show you how I harvest the rhizome from my ginger here.
Question. When you dig up the rhizomes you harvest, does it kill the plant?
This is a really great question. So because the rhizome is sort of like an underground fruiting body, it's possible to let the plant live. So I typically harvest, pretty much every ginger I've had experience with will defoliate in the winter. And in Florida, that's like, or for my ginger, that's below 60 degrees. So I typically wait until it defoliates. And then I dig in the area and I take out rhizome, and any other rhizome that are there will bring ginger in the following season. My Zingiber officinale, the leaves you can kind of tell. They're new. They are just coming out of the ground in the past few weeks. And I'll show you harvesting those as well. But this was such a healthy, vibrant area. I thought it would be a great way to show you how I do harvest the ginger. And that is putting the shovel kind of at the edge of where it's growing and seeing you have little rhizome. Oh, here we go. You can see the rhizomes forming, and then the roots are separate. So the rhizome. So I can take parts of it, and depending on the size of the rhizome, you know, the ones that I got from the health food store, those rhizomes are a lot larger, so that would be larger next to the plant. And you can see one here. I could take part of that rhizome without killing it. Can you see? Yeah. Okay. So let's go over to the ginger officinale. I had a friend very generously give me a ginger plant a couple of years ago. So we have an opportunity to see what ginger would look like growing in a pot. So ginger is a plant that, because we're harvesting the rhizome or the from underground, you don't always see everything that's going on. But this one showed us how it's trying to escape. So I'm going to remove it from this pot, and you'll get a chance to see the whole system in the pot. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
So you can see, you can cut off the roots. Thank you, little ginger. And this rhizome this is kind of small. It may or may not grow back, but chances are good that I could put back in the ground and it would grow. Oops. And then here's my rhizome. And I would wash it. You see the color? Beautiful. You can see where it's trying to grow a little bit more there too. So if you're growing in a pot, you have access to be able to harvest as much as you want. And then I can also just, I'm planning to put the rest of this in the ground. So if you decide to put it in the ground, make sure that you're putting it in a place where you want to commit to having it. Here's a big one. All those beautiful roots and rhizome. Any questions? Oh, that's gorgeous. So pretty. Any questions?
Mm-mm.
Now this rhizome, or any rhizome, I can use the one that I just pulled out of the ground. This one would be fine. It's already starting to grow a little bit. I could pull some that have started to grow from my health food store rhizome. And you're putting it under the ground. You want the growth to be pointing up. You want at least 2 knuckles.
Can you show close?
Yeah, you want at least 2 knuckles. You want to have the growth area to have access to grow up. You saw on the pot that go back to that. It's going to want to grow up. So whenever you're putting it in the soil, you want it to not be completely under the earth. Usually with seeds, you're going whatever the diameter of the seed, that deep, but we're not going that deep under the soil with our ginger. Some people say you just sort of cover it like you're a cat. I like to go a little bit more, but you could see with the rhizome we were collecting in the back of my yard that the rhizome is really closer to the surface of the soil. And then I would just keep this moist until I start to see those greens coming out. It loves Florida sandy soil. It can tolerate dry season. In Florida, it defoliates during the winter, so it's basically just hibernating under the soil during the winter. But it can also tolerate a lot of moisture. I've read how it's been found near riverbeds, but that's not typically where we see it. It's usually drier, sandier soil. That's ginger. Any questions? Thank you so much for joining me in our garden today. Feel free to email me with any questions. It's Maggie@holisticlivingschool.org. Little tiny writing. We look forward to seeing you in the garden next time.